Welcome to This Explainer. We are going to embark on a massive, sweeping journey today through thousands of years of ancient myth. We'll start by zooming all the way out to the literal creation of the cosmos, and then we'll travel right down to the enduring everyday legacy these magnificent stories have left in our modern minds. So let's dive right into this huge question. When we think of Greek mythology today, we kind of just think of marble statues or, big summer blockbuster movies. But the ancient Greeks used these incredible tales as a vital framework to make sense of a chaotic, often terrifying universe. It wasn't just entertainment for them, it was their science, their psychology, and their history all rolled into one giant epic. To keep us from getting lost in the weeds, we're going to use this roadmap to trace the evolution of Greek myth across 6 distinct eras. We'll go from chaos to cosmos, look at the rule of the Olympians, explore the age of heroes, the fall of Troy, fate and the underworld, and finally wrap up with the immortal legacy. Let's kick things off with part 1, From Chaos to Cosmos, the birth of the universe and the Titanomachy. Picture this. At the very beginning of time, there was just chaos, a yawning, gaping void. From that nothingness came Gaia, the earth, who birthed Uranus, the sky. Now, Uranus was a cruel ruler who literally shoved his own monstrous children deep underground. So Gaia schemes with her youngest Titan son, Cronus, who actually overthrows his father using a jagged flint sickle. But power just terrible things, right? Kronos becomes utterly paranoid himself, swallowing his own children whole just to keep his throne. It actually took his wife Rhea wrapping a rock in swaddling clothes to trick him, which allowed baby Zeus to survive in hiding on the island of Crete until he was finally strong enough to return. The thread tying all this early drama together is this brutal, inescapable prophecy of betrayal. Born directly from the blood of Uranus when he was cast down, it was a cosmic curse that haunted Cronus, and later, even Zeus himself. It turns out, absolute power brings absolutely terrifying paranoia. 10 years, that is a full decade of grueling, universe-shaking warfare known as the Titanomachy. To finally defeat his father Cronus, Zeus had to unleash his monstrous uncles, the Cyclopes and the 100-handed giants, from the darkest depths of Tartarus. With lightning bolts, earthquakes, and sheer brute force, the old Titans were finally cast down. Which brings us to part 2, Rule of the Olympians, a new humanized divine order. You really have to look at the stark contrast here between the old guard and the new. The Titans, they were these raw, ancient, elemental forces of nature. They ruled through pure primal fear and cruelty. But the Olympians, Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo, they were totally different. They were political, they were civilized, but man, they were also highly jealous, deeply flawed, and driven by very human emotions like lust, pride, and vengeance, all while ruling from their glittering marble halls high above the clouds. Okay, so the war is over, but before they could really settle in, the 3 victorious brothers had to divide the spoils. To prevent another massive war, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades actually cast lots to divide up the cosmos. Zeus drew the sky, Poseidon got the sea, and Hades took the shadowy underworld. But notice what's missing. The earth itself was left as a shared, neutral ground. This was our mortal realm, the exact place where the gods' ambitions and meddling would brew. Down on that neutral earth, humanity was slowly taking shape. After the Titan Prometheus sculpted us from clay and boldly stole fire from the gods just to keep us alive, the ancient poet Hesiod outlined how our existence played out. He saw human history as a steady, downward spiral. We started out great in a golden age of peace, fell into a prideful silver age, and then a brutal bronze age of constant war. Eventually, we landed in the Iron Age, which is our current era, basically characterized by sorrow, hard work, and a fading divine presence. But right before our Iron Age, there was a brief, brilliant flash of light. And that is part 3, the Age of Heroes. Demigods, monsters, and mortals. This is the era you probably know best. It was the time of the legendary demigods. You've got Perseus cleverly using Athena's mirrored shield to behead the snake-haired Medusa, the mighty Heracles, forced to complete 12 literally impossible labors, like strangling the Nemean lion, just to atone for a madness induced by a jealous Hera. Meanwhile, Theseus is navigating a pitch-black labyrinth to slay the Minotaur, and Jason is sailing off into the great unknown for the Golden Fleece. These stories are just absolutely packed with figures who were astonishingly courageous, deeply flawed, and so often beautifully doomed. And honestly, that perfectly shows how these brief mortal lives were just totally entangled with whatever the gods wanted. Take Oedipus and the doomed city of Thebes. Despite doing absolutely everything in his human power to outrun a horrific prophecy, Oedipus ran straight into its arms anyway. It's a really harsh reminder that in Greek myth, mortal willpower was pretty much no match for a divine curse. That tension leads us right into part 4, the fall of Troy, a war born of vanity and fire. It literally all started at a wedding over a petty vanity dispute between goddesses. Eris, the goddess of discord, tosses a golden apple inscribed "To the fairest." The mortal prince Paris is chosen to judge, and Aphrodite bribes him with the love of Helen, literally the most beautiful woman in the world. Taking Helen to Troy sparked a massive Greek retaliation. We see kings like Agamemnon doing the unthinkable, sacrificing his own daughter just to get favorable winds for his fleet. What followed was a brutal 10-year siege, culminating with the legendary warrior Achilles slaying Hector in the dust. But here's the crazy part. Brute force didn't actually win this war. Deception did. Beware Greek sparing gifts. That iconic warning was spoken by Laocoon, a Trojan priest, and it was tragically ignored. The Trojans completely convinced the Greeks had surrendered, dragged Odysseus's hollow wooden horse inside their impenetrable walls. They unwittingly sneaked the enemy right into their living room, sealing their fiery fate. Once the ashes of Troy drifted out to sea, the harsh reality set in. There were no true victors here. The returning Greeks were cursed by the gods for their wartime atrocities. Agamemnon faced a bloody murder in his own bathtub the second he got home. Meanwhile, brilliant Odysseus endured a grueling 10-year odyssey of shipwrecks, monsters, and sheer loss just to see his home island of Ithaca again. Glory came at a devastating price. Zooming out a bit, we hit part 5, Fate and the Underworld, the inescapable truth of death. Let's talk about Moira, or Fate. The Greeks personified this as 3 unseen, inescapable sisters who literally spun, measured, and cut the threads of human life. And get this, even Zeus, the king of Olympus with all his awesome thunderbolts, could not overrule their shears. The Greeks sought out cryptic oracles like the Pythia at Delphi, not to try and change their Moira, because you absolutely couldn't, but to understand it, so they could at least try to face the inevitable storm with some dignity. And when that thread finally got cut, well, death came for everyone. But the Greek underworld wasn't some place of fiery demonic punishment for most people. It was Hades, a vast, neutral, dim realm governed by very strict boundaries. Souls were ferried across the river Styx by Charon, past the 3-headed dog Cerberus, into a land ruled silently by the god Pluton, or Hades. Now, a rare heroic few found eternal spring in the Elysian fields, and the truly, truly wicked were tossed into Tartarus. But the vast majority of humanity simply drifted like shadows in the dim plains of Asphodel. Death was the ultimate, unavoidable equalizer. Finally, let's zoom all the way out for part 6, the immortal legacy, from living belief to enduring art. Back in the ancient era, this wasn't just a fun story. It was a literal belief system. People built massive marble temples and performed blood sacrifices to appease these incredibly volatile deities. But as the Roman Empire rose, they rebranded the Greek gods. Zeus became Jupiter, Aphrodite became Venus, adopting them as political symbols of order. Later on, as Christianity spread, the Olympians didn't just vanish. They were transformed by scholars and artists from demanding deities into psychological archetypes and poetic metaphors during the Renaissance. The big takeaway here? Myth isn't fixed in stone. It is a living memory. From the depths of Carl Jung's psychology identifying them as human archetypes, all the way to modern superhero comics showing caped demigods saving our cities, these ancient, flawed, and passionate gods are still walking quietly through our collective imagination today. We're literally still telling these exact same stories, just with fresh coats of paint. So that leaves us with one incredibly fascinating final question to ponder. Why do these specific tales endure? Perhaps we continue to tell these stories because the gods of Olympus, with all their vanity, their overwhelming grief, and their ambition, are simply the most accurate mirrors humanity has ever held up to itself. By looking at them, we are really just trying to understand ourselves. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today.